Thanks, everybody, for coming to the Special Committee on Council Advisory Boards and Commissions. I will turn it over to Assistant City Manager Evan Raleigh.
All right. Good morning, Mayor and members of the committee. Good to be with you this morning. I know this is the beginning of a long day of meetings for you, so we've got several follow-up items from the last committee meeting, but we'll try to move through it as expeditiously as we can. So just to quickly review, at our, I guess, the initial meeting of the special committee, we took you through some information related to the current function, structure of the various advisory boards and commissions, and the committee requested several follow-up items, many of which I'm happy to say we have been able to work through and will be presenting to you today. So we have Ms. Taisha Mosley with the Community Engagement Department that's going to walk you through three pieces of information. The first was the survey that we conducted of current and past advisory boards and commission members. So we will share the results of that survey with you. We have also worked hard to produce a draft bylaw template. There was a lot of conversation last go around about standardizing the structure of boards and commissions, and so we have a template for your consideration that we'll walk you through. And then lastly today, we will also provide you with some draft guidance on the council liaison role. There was a lot of discussion about more clarity on the roles and responsibilities of that function, and so we have some draft guidance that we have pieced together by looking at some other communities that have a lot of strong guidance in that area for your consideration. So without further ado, I'll ask Ms. Mosley to come up and begin to walk us through the presentation.
Good morning. Aren't I lucky to be the first face of all your meetings today? Yeah.
Good morning. I already had one, so you're number two.
Taisha Mosley, Community Engagement Department. And so as Mr. Raleigh discussed, we're going to go through all of those items, and then we've baked in a discussion point after each one so that you don't have to remember everything and then hold your questions until the end, unless that's your preference. So to just level set, as a quick reminder, here are the boards and commissions that we're referring to, and we're having some technical difficulties, so don't mind the arrow and the red dots. They'll be throughout the slides today. Nevertheless, we are referring to the boards and commissions that are advisory in nature, only appointed by the City Council. All right? So that experience survey, it went to over 300 of our wonderful volunteers, which you see pictured there on the right side of your screen. We received 101 responses. There were 15 questions in total. Again, both current and former members, and the question types varied between open and closed-end questions. This may be a little bit difficult to read, but we wanted to make sure you could see that we had participation from almost every advisory board or commission. And the reason that there's an other at the bottom is only because, I'll use an example, two people selected other, but they're a part of the mayor's committee for persons with disabilities, but they are listed up there. They just didn't see it. So it's not another board, I promise. Some quick highlights. Overall, about 78% of the respondents indicated that they had their overall experience was good with the Board of Commission. 80% agreed that the mission and goals were made clear and understood and followed by its members. 78% agreed that their expectations and role as a board member were made clear. 80% agreed that the meetings were productive and an efficient use of their time. 69% of the respondents stated that the recommendations that they make to City Council, that they make recommendations to City Council on issues it was created to address.
And that's an interesting data point, right? I mean, it sort of drops, and that they feel like, I mean, and can you elucidate, do you have more information on that particular point, that they feel like they're maybe off topic?
A little bit in the open-ended part, but I believe we'll cover that.
Okay.
73% agree that the recommendations or programs that they make as a board or commission have a measurable impact on the community. We did have a question where we posed the potential merger or consolidation of boards. You all asked, well, would council appoint the body that became a subcommittee, or would the board want to do that? And 57% support the members of that overarching board selecting members of the subcommittee. We also asked for recommendations on a potential merger, if that was something that they agreed with. You had about 20% of respondents who said that they see value in a potential merge. And here's some of those recommendations. You'll see that historic cemeteries and historic resources was mentioned 4 times as a place that made sense for alignment or merge. Bicycle and parks and greenway was mentioned a couple of times. We also have heard from staff about BPAC and transit being a good fit there. Human relations, police advisory, human relations, substance use. So there were different options. At the bottom, you'll see one person just kind of said everything. Bicycle and pedestrian, transit, environmental, stormwater, policing, greenway. They did not give us much context there, but I included it for your information. An example that was in the comments were that historic resources and museums could create a committee to handle cemetery-related matters. Someone stated that substance use could be a part of the county since it's health-related. So just giving you that for context. There was also a question about ways that we can improve operations. And so I'll tell you, there were 75 comments. This does not capture everything. However, here are the things that were repeated multiple times. There was a clear desire for consistency of practice on the role of a council liaison or the attendance of that liaison. There was a want for increased communication with council. They sought the opportunity to weigh in on current and active projects or priorities that council has, and they want more feedback on their annual work plans. And then there were questions about how do those work plans align with your priorities. They mentioned a consistent process, onboarding process and training for board members. And so our department does have an overarching board and commission onboarding that we started in November of 2022. And we do a train the trainer model, but again, it's overarching and general in nature. Turnover was mentioned several times. Meeting formats came up. Someone mentioned that they feel like orientation should be required. They said, they mentioned new employee orientation for city employees and wanted a board orientation required for all new appointees. They also talked about, some people mentioned clarity from council on the expectations. Something that I found interesting, and you may as well, was that board docs came up, and I said, well, that's good to know because we're working on that. But someone mentioned wanting more dedicated support for all boards and commissions, and they included staff, funding, and accessibility. The accessibility part was if a person with a disability is serving as a secretary of a board, they may need more assistance typing or trying to send an email. Stricter enforcement of attendance was also mentioned there, and then a smoother nomination and filling of vacancies was mentioned in our general operations questions. You all talked about how we could do more coordination and cross-collaboration across boards, so we received about 70 responses on this topic, and this just captures some of them, some of which you all already talked about. A regular meeting of the board and commission chairs and leadership teams, a quarterly, annual, or, not and or, biannual strategic planning meeting, topics of joint study, inviting board members from other boards to participate on a regular basis. There was a comment that said, this was someone from the Planning Commission, and they said, Allowing other boards to hear the same cases that Planning Commission hears would be helpful. For example, if Stormwater or Fair Housing could hear some of our cases before we do, we think it would be more efficient for our meetings. So that was a recommendation that was made there when it comes to how boards and commissions could collaborate. All right, so we're going to pause here for discussion on the survey.
No, again, for me, the fact that only 69%, so over a third of the people are not sure that they're really working on the issues that are important to council. And I was just curious, were there certain boards where that was the case? Because I get that some of these boards definitely have broader, more wide-ranging topics where it would be easy to go in 15 different directions, and others seem tighter, right? I mean, Planning Commission is going to get a much tighter. So I'm just curious to know which boards scored, the lowest on a sense of clarity. Yeah. And then also this idea that a quarter don't think they're having measurable impact, and that kind of goes to, I think, even, the council, we've talked a lot about more metrics on our own, like for affordable housing and making sure we know the impact we're having, but it sounds like they have the same. So working on these metrics and dashboards, but again, were there specific boards where that was?
Yeah, we do have that raw data. I don't have it available with me now, but I can get that pulled and make it, and get it to the committee.
Yeah. So for me, I find that interesting, but yet still, 80% feel they have a good relationship. So one of my questions, and I think the raw data would say is, you said you had 101 responses. Did those 101 answer every question?
I believe some of them, some of the questions were optional, but we can double check.
Okay, because I think that may impact that percentage as well. If we're measuring against 101 respondents, if some didn't answer certain questions, it may skew a number one way or the other. And the other question I had, and something I thought about sitting here, if we can match up our boards to our strategic plan, if we can, find a way and see where they fall within their strategic plan under our committees, then that'll also help us get back to, do they feel what they're doing is measurable? Is it making an impact? All of those things, because we can say, okay, this is how what you're doing relates to items within the strategic plan. And then that may also help us decide, okay, what boards we may need to tweak as far as their workload and what they're doing. So that's just something I just thought about sitting here.
Sure, and we took a stab at that, Councilmember Branch, at your retreat, and we can bring that back to for information for you.
Yeah, I would say that I love the idea of what in my mind it's like buckets, and I think the strategic plan is a good way to function as those buckets and introduce them to each other. I know when I speak with my boards and I meet with them, there is some. They want to learn more and they want to meet other boards. And I do encourage them, like no one's stopping you. Like no one is saying you cannot. No one is saying you can't participate in Planning Commission or do that. So I think there's this wall that they don't know what is possible and how do we show them, there's a whole world of possibilities that you can do and make that part of our guidance. So I agree with the guidance of.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Well, to piggyback on your point too, I know there's an opportunity for all the boards and commissions to get together for is it like a summer social, something like that?
It is. Right now, the Community Engagement Department has, I think we've done it for 2 years now. I think we've done this 2 years, but it is a social event. I think it was driven by some of the conversation among the boards wanting to have those opportunities to engage, across the various boards and commissions in the city. I think this committee has talked about maybe taking that interaction up a level, making it more formal, a little more plenary. I think the mayor used the term like a plenary kind of session, and I think we have that's the desire. We certainly have a foundation to build off in that summer social. I don't know if Ms. Mosley wanted to add anything more to that.
You're right.
Yeah. So that'd be interesting to see, if there's some type of formal meeting And if it's not the entire board or commission, but maybe like leadership of each board have, a semi-annual opportunity to come together to meet, maybe talk about issues and collaborate and things along those lines.
Well, and just, I think on that point, I know, referencing my own university, all the boards and commissions, there's a directory that you can access so that you can see who's the chair, who do I reach out to? I mean, part of this is probably just the confusion of who is, how do I even contact them? So is there some sort of portal or I know we have the boards doc where they could get the directory that would be refreshed every quarter or something for members of these boards if they wanted to reach out to their compatriots?
I wouldn't call it a formal directory that does not exist. The information on board docs is available, contacting the clerk's office, working with their staff liaison, but a formal directory of information does not exist at the moment.
I mean, that might be a nice way to, especially if we're moving to a plenary session, to give them their ability, to actually empower them to do what we're telling them they can do, but they don't have the information to actually execute.
Yeah. I had another thought, and it was a point you made about them wanting to have more feedback on their work plans. And I think when I talked to the boards and I explained that to them, I said, remember, prior to today in this council or in this session, our meetings would go so long. Like we would have hours and hours long meeting. And this was always one of the last things we did, which was go over work plans. And so did them a disservice for them to do and then we go, okay, cool, yeah, all right, and go. And we didn't necessarily always give feedback. So that is something that I heard loud and clear from multiple boards that I directly work with. And I don't know what the solution is for that because I can't promise that our meetings are always going to be as short as they have been in the last few months to where we can give that direction and where this is their moment. This is the once a year they come up and they are so, as they should be, they're so proud of the work and it doesn't always reflect in our responses to them because of the work that we have. So I don't know what the resolution is to that, but I can definitely understand it.
True. So I have a question going back to boards wanting to interact with each other. Are they sharing that information with the staff liaison who can, and is the staff liaison, like I'm trying to understand, because the way I see it having, prior to council, I was on the Raleigh Transit Authority. And if there was something that we needed from another board based upon where we want to put a stop or something,
Sure.
we understood, reach out to the staff liaison, this is what we need, and they will help coordinate that. Is that not happening? Is that not understood? Because I don't want us to sit up here and say there isn't no way for them to connect that we haven't put in place yet. There may be ways for us to amplify it, but are they even aware of the tools they have right now?
Yes, so there are some boards who have formal processes where they have volunteers on the board who are responsible for attending other board meetings and reporting that information back to the full board.
Okay.
They have that implemented in their practices, maybe even in their bylaws. There are other boards and commissions where something may come up and they say, well, it would be good if we attended Arts Commission to get more information, or we send someone to attend Arts Commission to get more information. There are other informal practices where they may work through the staff liaison to say, hey, maybe we have an update on this particular topic. So that does happen. There being a space where boards and commissions are coming together on a regular basis to
create a
do
space
this
for 'em.
does not
needed.
exist. Yes.
Okay.
And I also, to your point, want to highlight that there are some boards that their leadership isn't always consistent. And I don't mean that as a dig. I just mean that as there might be somebody who's brand new to the board. I know this happens on substance abuse. She was there for 3 months, and then the chair left, and she got voluntold to be the chair. And so I think there is a inconsistency on what level they understand that role or will have the bandwidth to be that role. So we also have to remember that as well. It's not that every chair in every board is like, yes, I want to do this, I want to do this. Sometimes they're just told, yeah, you're it, and that's where we get. And so they may not be as participatory because they don't have somebody out there who really understands what the options are. If you're on the board for 3 months, you don't know the list of boards that you could participate with, and say, okay, well, we're trying to form our work plan, and now to work with another board, I don't even know what we're doing. So I think that's an element of it too, that again, I don't know how to address.
Okay.
I guess, I mean, I'm curious what the staff recommendations are coming out of this survey. We can talk a lot, but I want this to be an action-oriented task force. We've only got a limited amount of time, so we've heard some things. Do y'all have recommendations of next steps? I think we've made some suggestions of tools and information, but
I think we approached today looking for a direction to return to council with next steps. Certainly, we can look at creating, we do have the foundation with the summer social and creating some more informal or formal ways for boards and commissions to come together to share information. We were looking for what direction it is that the committee wanted staff to take to implement these things. Because like I said, there were 70 responses on one question and 69 responses on another. So we were looking for direction.
I was gonna say, for me, I think is one is trying to create maybe that additional space for the leaderships of the boards, commissions to kind of meet. And then to go back to Councilwoman Jones, you know, finding a way to orient the leadership of a board of what that commit, at least if nobody else, at least the person that says they're the chair of the board knows what the board is supposed to do. And if they're not sure, then creating a lane for that education. Because you're right, I've seen it where someone is new to it because the person who left was the past chair and there was no real handoff. And it's then left on staff to try to bring up the speed. But if you all have had changes, because trust me, in the last years I've been on council, I've seen the changes that we've made that created those changes. All of that knowledge may not be there. So whatever we can do to create that, that's what I would be looking for, to create that space. At the same time, I don't want us to be too directive because we want the solutions from these committees to come from their organic, you know, conversations and meetings. And because if we're going to tell them what to do, we don't need them.
well, I mean, I would say like there's all sorts of issues that, I
Yeah.
mean, we would love input. I mean, I will say that LGBTQ history, the legacy of the Human Relations Commission and how powerful and substantive their contributions were was amazing. I mean, so that was, and I would say it's also, look, when you've got 30 boards and commissions, you're going to get less input, less feedback, less interaction, more confusion. It's just going to be really diffuse. If we had 8 really strong boards, right, it'd be a different story. So I'm still, I mean, my direction is still like, can we combine particularly boards that have had poor attendance, lots of turnover, lack of, you know, clarity on their direction, I particularly think things like substance abuse. I mean, we don't have oversight of that. It's harder for us. I don't understand drug addiction, and I'm hard pressed to give direction. So, I mean, I think trying to get these groups, you know, working, and if they all want to work together, why are they working separately to start with? So I am all about, can we get some recommendations? I think we've already heard, I don't know whether we already made a vote on historic cemeteries, which seems to have maybe struggled and is clearly combinable, but are there other, you know, recommendations so we can have fewer boards with more meaningful input and impact?
Sure. Yes, we can certainly return with, I'm sorry, Mayor President.
The only thing I was going to say is, with the suggestion of looking at the city's strategic plan and kind of where boards align, that may give us some guidance in terms of which boards may be able to be merged.
Yep.
Because as you're starting to put them in certain buckets under that plan, then you may see that there are 2 or 3 that are kind of working in silos, but kind of doing some similar work. And so that may be a way to give us that guidance that you're asking for.
Well, and if you go back, I mean, can we go back to the slide where they made their own suggestions? And have we talked to the leadership specifically then about, have we talked to the head of historic cemeteries to say, are you okay going to historic resources?
Yes.
Yes, and
Okay.
yes. The answer is yes to that. Because I spoke to the board specifically about this topic in April.
Okay.
And they are completely fine. I mean, I would definitely check. Don't just take my
No,
word for it.
you're correct. So we've heard it from the board, we've heard it from staff on that particular one.
And are you getting a phone a friend coming down here?
Come on.
He looked hesitant, but he looked like he was coming to the podium, so.
He knew he was going to be my phone a friend today.
He didn't know that? Okay.
Good morning to the mayor and council. I'm Charles Craig, one of the assistant directors for Raleigh Parks and the staff liaison to the Historic Cemetery Advisory Board. So the Historic Cemetery Advisory Board is completely open to a merger or whatever your pleasure on what to do with the Historic Cemetery Advisory Board. One of the reasons why the board is open to a change is because the mission of the board has been accomplished. And this is exciting. This is great news. When the board was formed, it was around understanding the maintenance, the preservation, understanding how to preserve and move such a sacred historic site into a lasting, beautiful location to visit. We have done that. We have trained staff. We have went to multiple trainings and hosted events. And now we're in a great place of outreach and education. So that is our new mission, is getting the word out, continuing to promote it. But the main core of it has been accomplished.
I think that there's, we heard from the board members, and then I think there's validity in hearing from, not this moment, but from the staff liaisons who can really help us guide what they've been experiencing, and then on a staff level, be able to say, this is where that might merge. So I think that could be useful.
I mean, I'll make a motion. I mean, do we need a motion to combine historic cemeteries with historic resources and museum advisory? Yeah. Do you
It
wanna-
can be part of our recommendation
Okay.
to the full council.
And I think that's not the only one. I think there are other areas, so maybe if we can get enough information so we could do it all at once instead of patchwork,
So were there other areas, the other discussion has been, instead of human relations being splintered into all these different groups, there was a proposal for African American, we got Hispanic and immigration, you've got substance abuse. I mean, that's the other area where, to me, there's a power in those cross-fertilizing and working together on issues. But again, I do not know how open these folks are to that collaboration as a team.
There's certainly mixed opinions. So when we first, I mean Evan, because I had the flu, but when this was first discussed at retreat and we showed it with the alignment with the strategic plan, there was certainly overlap. There could be conversation or difference of opinion of some boards fit in multiple places in our strategic plan, things like that. There are some members of boards and commissions who believe are in complete support of it, and it makes sense in the human relations example for a different board to be a subcommittee. And there are some people who don't. So it really could go either way. Staff is open and flexible to making it work at the pleasure of the council.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, this gets back to some of the early conversations before this board was established, is ultimately, I think our perspective is that it's in these boards and these advisory boards and commissions are seated by you. They are responsive to you, and ultimately, it's a question of, do you want them to function in a way that you all feel is most effective for your purposes? I think we've acknowledged that will be divided opinions about mergers or combinations or sunsetting of some boards, but I think our perspective is that it's your pleasure to structure these in a way that you believe to be the most effective way for you to receive useful and beneficial input. So I think what we've tried to do with the information that we've provided so far is to kind of lay the foundation, to see the current state, show opportunities and overlap, and we provided some of that in the strategic plan, but we can share it again. But really, I think we're looking for you to, give us direction about how you want to arrive at those recommendations. Certainly, we can take away some of what we've gathered as staff, but it really could be more effective if you all share with us what you'd like to see. I don't know if
Another
that makes
element
sense.
that I would like to understand better is which departments are in charge, because I know that equity and inclusion has a lot of these boards. And so I think that's an element that we do have to take into consideration, because I don't want to say, oh, let's get rid of everyone except for the ones in equity and inclusion and let's add them all there. And then that really puts a strain on your departments. So we've heard from members, we have our opinions, but I think the missing element for me is what works best for you guys, because you guys are the ones that are staffing it and helping to make, so I really think that's an important part that I don't want to skip over.
One of the things I want us to consider when we're talking about merger boards is also board size, making sure a board is effective. Because if we look at, the Hispanic and Immigrants Affairs Board and the Human Relations Board, to do a merger of them based on their current sizes, I think would be too big. Then if you add the African American Affairs Board to it, then you're probably adding another 5 to 7 people. So if we're saying we're going to merge, what does that look like? So I'm not against it. I think we just need to make sure that in merging boards, we have an effective board size so that they can have subcommittees to look into these issues in detail and still be an effective overall board. So I think that was one of the reasons why, Hispanic part was pulled out, because that's one thing we got to consider too, is an effective board size. Because you have too many cooks in the kitchen, you get nothing done.
And I'd be interested to learn how other cities do it. What are other cities doing with their boards and commissions? How large are they? How do they categorize them?
Sure.
Instead of trying, I might be saying the completely wrong thing.
No, you're fine. We did some research, and it just varied. There were some cities with more boards than us. There were some cities where, in almost all instances, the boards and commissions that existed were tailored to that city and the needs of where they were. So it's not, from what we found, it's not very much apples to apples. It was apples to watermelons, not even oranges. It's just very different. Appointment processes and things are very similar in nature, but the number of people on the boards, the number of boards and commissions, it really just varies, at least in North Carolina.
And I would just be interested, on this group, do you feel like, from a human relations, is it better to have a Jewish board, a Muslim board, a Hispanic board, an immigrant board, an African-American board? Like, should we have all of those be separate boards? Or is it better to have a human relations board with an intermingling of all those issues and a cross-fertilization of those issues? And I'm just curious, because I've had multiple requests for things like a Jewish affairs board, and my gut sense is no. Like,
Right.
I don't want to create a bunch of separate individual. It almost seems antithetical to human relations. Why are we segregating all the groups to talk about their own issues as opposed to integrating those groups into a board? But that's my gut sense, but I'm curious what y'all think.
Well, or have the Human Relations Committee maybe have subcommittees if there's specific issues
Yeah.
that come up, and then they can kind of track those issues, have conversations about it, and then report back to us on various topics. So that may be more useful and more effective.
I would agree.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the question that came up there is, would those subcommittees be staffed by council, would be appointed by council, would be by the Human Relations Commission? So I think that's a question
Okay.
that is worth studying for sure.
And then I guess to Councilor Branch's earlier point, to me, size, I totally understand that, having worked with some really oversized boards. I think what I've seen is we've had a lot of turnover and new nominations. I think we could get to the right size of any of these boards, in some certain period of time, and could work with the folks on there to support them, in the interim where it may be too many if we do merge.
And the size of the board might affect the attendance, because you've got some that have 15, like community engagement has a lot. And so if they don't have that quorum of 8 to 9 people, then they can't meet, and that's been effective in the past. That's been an issue. So maybe the right sizing of it is shrinking those numbers as well. I'm not sure.
Okay. I know you had 2 other things, and we got 11:30.
Okay. So the next piece was the bylaws template. And so the intended goals here was to standardize the structure and operation of our boards and commissions in the way that they operate, create clear guidance and guidelines, establish consistent practices. What we did as staff was review all of the bylaws templates of our advisory boards and commissions. 5 of them were used primarily as a guide for the conversation that we're going to have today. In your attachment with the agenda item, we did reserve space on the document for unique circumstances of certain boards and commissions. What we found was that when we talk about standardization, there were spaces where, although it's required by the Resolution 2002-240, preparing and submitting a work plan was actually not stated in all of the bylaws, right? So technically, it was like a loophole, if you will, or someone could say there was, although we could refer to the resolution. So we wanted to make sure it was clear that, no, it's a part of your bylaws that you have to prepare and submit a work plan to the council. Work plan activities, we added explicit language in the document that's before you that they have to fall within the purview and the scope of your board or commission. We saw instances where boards are working on things that did not necessarily align with what it is they were created to do. We address residency in the standard template that you all have. For example, there are some boards and commission where it is required that you reside in city limits, and if someone were to move out of city limits, this template explicitly states that you must forfeit your seat. The resignation of members, we added language saying that you do need to notify the city clerk. Just no longer attending meetings isn't actually resigning. I mean, at some point, someone's going to reach out to you and ask you why you aren't coming, but giving clarity around those things. Notice of meetings, we saw that there just wasn't consistency, and there's actually requirements that you have to, because it's a public meeting, you do have to give a certain notice to let people and to let the public know that you're having the meeting. This also applies to the committees of our boards and commissions. Establishing quorum, it actually does not include vacant seats. So again, some of the things that we saw in the survey, we believe are addressed in this template that you have. And Luke, if you could go ahead and pull that up on your end, and I'll take questions that you all have about the proposed. I'm sorry? That's the one. Questions that you have about this proposed template. This would apply to all of your advisory boards and commissions.
Would this be, this is the template for everything, would this be able to be added on if the board had a specific thing that's not mentioned in here?
So we reserved a section in the bylaws so they could go to that particular article. So everything would be the same except the article where it's reserved specifically for the Board of Commissions. So this gets us away from anything that doesn't align with what they were intended to do, anything that should not be there. Council can always go, council, staff can go to right there, Article 6. So if there's ever a question about, is this allowed? Should this be here? It's reserved in one section and everything else. This was done in collaboration with equity and inclusion. So to your point, they do have the most boards and commissions in their department. They contribute to this. The city clerk's office, thank you so much. Multiple staff. We reviewed the bylaws of all boards and commissions, but explicitly Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Hispanic Immigrant Affairs, Arts Commission, Community Engagement Board, Human Relations Commission, and Environmental Advisory Board are the 5 that we use as the guide in the creation of this to make sure that we use the traditional needs of a governing document, but again, also addressing the concerns that we heard from boards and commission members, the concerns that we've heard from staff, the concerns we've heard from you all, and putting it all in one place was the goal here.
Just one question I have, which
Sure.
goes to the subcommittees. So how are subcommittees treated here? So the board itself appoints subcommittees, and is there support for those subcommittees or not? Is that specified in the bylaws?
Staff support? Mm-hmm. Yes, that, in the bylaws here, it talks about subcommittees and how they are created, how the board creates subcommittees. Staff support is not explicitly addressed. We do have a handbook that we outline what staff support looks like, but that is not in the bylaws document.
Okay.
So I have a question around the annual work plan. It's supposed to be at the beginning of the year, but we seem to get work plans, August through July. So is there a way that we, and it's kind of for the board here, is there a way we want to set where we want work plans in a certain time frame? Now, that may not mean they all come and present, because they all can't present in the same meeting, but at the same time, still have the work plans done, and then we find a way to kind of approve them, because I think y'all have spaced them out purposely because there's so many boards.
Yes, so our team was tasked with agenda management,
Right.
keeping track, making sure that everybody is actually coming before you as they're supposed to. Some boards currently have a certain month in the year in which their bylaws state that they come to you. So we try to work around that the best that we can. So that's at your will, and we can incorporate that in the way that you would like.
And the reason why I mention that too, because I think of it from a funding standpoint. If a board is coming with something, they need funding, them coming to us at the June meeting, it's too late. Even though staff will find a way to set something aside or whatever, but.
And I will add that we do currently have a pause on boards and commissions coming with bylaw updates, work plan updates while we figure all this stuff out. So they're eagerly waiting to fill up your agendas with their updates.
So it sounds like one thing we may have to do, if we follow that plan and come up with a certain time window, is go back and look at the bylaws, particularly the ones that will fall outside of that window, and make the adjustments so that they are in alignment, but come at a certain time or.
We can. They essentially, so Ellen's here in the audience, and she's really the magic behind it all. You just see my face. So she works with the staff liaisons. They have a form that they fill out on behalf of their board, and they say, we give them all the months, and they go put the board in, and they select it themselves. So they're having those conversations. They know not to select June because it's too late. If it's full, we'll have a conversation with the city manager's office, the clerk's office, to say, hey, we know the agenda's heavy, but EAB really needs to get on this particular agenda. So we do some of that stuff in the background to make sure it happens at the time that it needs to. So it's the staff liaison and Ellen who are working together behind the scenes to make sure they get before you on time.
And one thing that I'm thinking, and I know it's hard with the work plans, but you got some folks that will come, and it will be a quick 5 or 10 minute overview, and then some people come and they want to tell us everything down to every detail that they've done, which can be very time consuming. So we may have to put something in place that's like a guide, 10 to 15 minutes, for a presentation. Sure. And as staff liaisons, y'all can maybe kind of help them figure
Sure.
out from a presentation standpoint, what would be important highlights, and so that they're not necessarily bogged down feeling like they've got to tell us every detail of everything.
We have provided them with a guide, and we will continue to work on their the timeliness of their presentations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And And I think that having the buckets attached to the strategic plan could also help us really organize our own thoughts.
Okay.
This time we're going to talk about safe, vibrant, healthy, and whatever committees deal with that. Now we know where the focus is. I mean, there might, just a thought, you know,
Okay.
maybe that's a way to organize how they come before us so that we're not bouncing back and forth to different topics that we can't follow. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I think I like this, though. I love that it's consistent and it's clear, and there's still room for them to add some questions. I do think that maybe mentioning, like Mayor Cowell said, you know, staff support for the subcommittees, because I think that can get kind of confusing if Parks and, you know, the SWAT committee has staff and they but then others don't. I think that might be confusing, so maybe being able to outline it.
Sure, and just point of clarity, the role, Mayor Cowell, what you're looking for is the role that staff plays as a part of supporting the committees of the boards.
I just think, given that you may theoretically have a Human Relations Commission that's
Sure.
got some strong subcommittees,
Sure.
if that's a broader catch-all, it would just be good to say that you can work with board, you know, to see if you need
Okay.
the support at that subcommittee level. I'm not saying it has to be a given, but just something to speak to so that folks who
Okay,
have a lot of subcommittees, and I know Parks has a lot of subcommittees. Just
Transit has 4.
Yeah.
sure.
And I don't know if the tradition has been that those subcommittees get no support, you negotiate the support. And again, I know there's also staff limitations, so what
Sure.
you don't want to do is have overcommit. I just want to sort of set expectations of how that's handled.
Sure. The next item will show, we're going to talk about council liaison guidelines. And should you think that that's a good direction, we could further develop a staff liaison role, because we have some guidelines for staff liaisons, and we can further expand that to explicitly include how we support subcommittees of staff too. With that, and bring that back to you for
Yeah.
consideration. Okay. Any other questions about the bylaws? All right. The screen over here is broken, so that's why I'm calling on Luke. Luke, if you can get us back to the slide deck, please. Thank you, sir. All right. So, council liaison recommendations. This was also one of the items that we talked about last month, and just wanting some guidance. We looked at policies and practices in different cities and towns who was just further along than us and into how they approach this. There are the places listed on the screen. What they did was specify the time in which the document that's on your agenda item specifies the time in which the mayor may designate a council liaison. It explains the role of the council liaison, what they should or should not refrain from. It addresses attendance expectations of a council liaison as well. And if you could pull that one up for me on your end. All right, and so on that document, I promise I would do it myself, y'all, if I could. They're like, she's using Luke. All right, so again, just some quick highlights there. At the organizational meeting following the council election, the mayor may designate a council liaison to each board or commission. We know there are more boards and commissions than you all. Some of the things listed here, serving as a primary two-way channel between the board and commission, primary informal contact for the board or commission, helping to resolve problems or issues that may arise, providing procedural direction and relaying council's vision for the board or commission, serving as a contact rather than an advocate or an ex officio member of the board, reviewing annual work plans and making recommendations to the city council regarding it, identifying and helping resolve any problems that may exist, and at the bottom of the document, it just talks about the attendance piece. So council Liaisons do not normally attend monthly meetings, is what the draft document says. But they can be informed of activities through agenda and minutes, work plans, annual reports. Liaisons may attend a meeting due to interest in a specific item, pop in and observe, and then it lays out how staff liaison or the board or commission member may request that a council member attend a meeting on a specific item if that's needed. So this is just for your discussion, review, consideration, and direction.
So I like it. Number 9 concerns me only from the standpoint of we have elections, you have a new council member who doesn't understand the boards. How are they able to facilitate training of new board members? So that would probably be the only item that I have questions about. Because they're new and they're trying to come up to speed themselves on the boards and commissions. I use Mitch as a great example. Being new, liaison, asking him to go, say he had planning, go, well, no, that's not a good example for Mitch. We'll give him that, I don't know what to give him, we'll give him arts. You know, how does he know what they do? Because when a new board starts, a lot of them in the middle of doing subcommittee work for the budget. We come in December and January, they're reviewing and having meetings to.
Yeah, I would say that I would agree that number 9 feels like it would be more of a staff thing to facilitate the new board and commission training, especially since previously we were talking about it, we're just supposed to be there to observe. It's hard to be there to observe, but then really be in charge of creating that onboarding process.
Sure.
Well, I think it's just saying that so maybe you could just say may provide suggestions to staff related to training.
That could be fair.
And that way, nobody's reading this as us doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I think facilitate, so I'm thinking facilitate.
But this is good to have this, and it looks like it'll be a very helpful document.
And it gives direction to council.
Yeah.
All right, so any other questions for me? Mr. Raleigh?
It's okay.
I guess the one follow-up is on the nomination committee. So the bylaws here just have council doing the nominations, is that correct?
The bylaws has explicit language that nomination committees are not allowed and are done by the city council may accept recommendations at their leisure.
And that also gives the council permit, that we have the way if we need to go to a board and say, hey, what do you need or what skill sets? And then we can help facilitate it. But at the end of the day, it's our call because we're responsible per some other statute that the city attorney knows.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's all the content. I know it was a lot. I think this has been helpful for us. I just wanted to kind of summarize, I think, what I've heard today to make sure it's consistent with what you all are hearing. I think as far as items that we will come back to you with at the next meeting, certainly we can take a stab at putting together some suggestions for boards and commissions that may be merged. We'll present, kind of the opportunities, feedback that we heard from the survey, feedback, our review of the alignment with strategic plan, some of the conversation today, and we'll produce that to you for your review to see how you might want to consider some of those possible merger opportunities. Now, we'll also bring back for a strategy that would sort of outline how the composition of the boards would work in the event of a merger. I know there's concern about board size. We can give some additional thought to that so we can lay out, in the cases that you want to merge a board, here's how we would recommend that process look. I know that there remains, we had some conversation about the appointment of the subcommittees of the board, whether that was a survey question. I think just over roughly half of respondents said, they would love the opportunity to appoint as the boards, the members of the subcommittee. I think that might be an unsettled question that we can bring back for further discussion next time, whether that's a board responsibility or a council would feel more comfortable appointing the subcommittee participants. So those are the two items that we're going to bring back, I think, for conversation. I think there has been some consensus around, I'm kind of making a running list of the items I think there's consensus on to recommend out to the full council. It sounds like the council liaison guidance with that revision to that particular item, number 9, that is something that the subcommittee would like to advance to the council for consideration. That liaison guidance, the adoption of the standard bylaw template is something that it sounds like there's consensus to advance. Also, some of these procedural things around the boards and commissions. So the procedure specifically for the work plan. Councilmember Jones made the recommendation to align the presentation of those with the strategic plan categories. We could do some additional work around that, but also we have certainly heard to the desire to more formally orient the chairs of the committees and to create a space for a regular convening of the boards or the leadership or both. And so that's work that we will do. But again, I think those are the consensus points at this point for the committee to suggest to the full council. I know that was a lot, but I hope that captured everything.
That was a good capture. Just one additional thought on the subcommittees. Another piece of feedback I've heard is, like, for example, you have the Environmental Advisory, which has a tree subcommittee, and then the Parks and Rec has a tree subcommittee. And then I've had people suggest we have another tree subcommittee, So as staff, I don't know how much input we have on what subcommittees are formed, and then maybe helping direct folks. I'm not saying it's better to have it on parks or better to have it on environmental, but what you don't want is 3 different subcommittees all sitting there trying to do individual work on trees with individual requests of staff. So it's at some point, I just, if you could clarify what sort of input so that we can help these boards use their time and use staff time as wisely as we can. I just think that may be helpful.
Madam Mayor, question. Would it be an idea that subcommittees get council approval?
I mean, that might be helpful as part of the work plan, right?
Yeah,
You
as part of the work
name
plan.
if there's subcommittees so that we're not creating
Multiple subcommittees
a lot
doing the
of
same thing.
confusion and, yeah.
We can certainly do that. Build that into the work plan or bylaws.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, appreciate all the support.
Thank
And I think we are, right, adjourned.
Thank you.